Our laws on sexual assault are antiques, but they're not precious ones. We need our lawmakers to step up and make a difference. So a special thanks to Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara and the Interim Legislative Study Committee, who is undertaking the study of consent. But everything on this video applies across the United States and around the world. I'm Joyce Short. I'm a sexual assault survivor. I'm also the author of Your Consent, The Key to Conquering Sexual Assault, and the founder and director of the Consent Awareness Network. So let's get down to the business of making the world a safer place. When I began researching my book, what I found was shocking. No state or territory actually defines consent in its penal code. Some jurisdictions have provisions about consent, but none actually define consent, and this oversight enables rape mentality. Today, two very brave women who fought hard to bring Harvey Weinstein to justice, Tarale Wulff and Haley, have a message for you.
Hi, my name is Tarale Wulff. I was a Mullineaux witness at the Weinstein trial, and I testified against him earlier this year. At his trial, Weinstein remarked that he was confused and that all men are confused. Do I believe that? Absolutely not. I don't believe that he was confused for 1 minute. I think he was very well aware of what was right and what was wrong. But if there is no legal definition of consent, then he's allowed to claim confusion.
Weinstein was sentenced to a term of 20 years for sexually assaulting Mimi Haley.
I was shocked to learn that Judge Burke had said, use your common sense when asked for a definition of consent by the jury. I think common sense can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on a lot of different factors. And so I feel that we're dealing with people's lives here. And so within a legal context, there really needs to be a very, very clear definition so that a jury can evaluate within a legal context exactly what that means.
I believe that a correct and understandable definition of consent that should be included in the penal code is freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement.
You see, if every jury has to use their common sense about what consent is, then there is no equal justice under the law for rape and sexual assault victims. The jury should be deciding the guilt and innocence over the facts and the evidence in the case, and not because of their confusion over what consent really means. It's very common for jurors to ask the judge for the definition for consent in sexual assault and rape cases. A perfect example of how this plays out is the Bill Cosby case. The first jury asked Judge Stephen O'Neill for the definition, and his response was, "That's a question that cannot be answered." And then he went on to say, "You're reasonable people. Use your common sense." The second jury asked the same question, and Judge O'Neill gave them the same answer. The difference was that the foreperson for the jury was a cybersecurity expert by the name of Cheryl Carmel. And Cheryl was familiar with the General Data Protection Regulation definition for consent, which is practically identical to the definition that I present in my TEDx talk. Both of them, by the way, became, my TEDx talk was presented in May of 2018, and GDPR became international law in May of 2018. And we both state, freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement as the definition for consent. Recently, some jurisdictions have passed blame the victim language into law. They state that your words and actions constitute consent. Consent is a form of agreement. Words and actions are a form of conveyance, and always cause and effect applies. So when someone induces your agreement by a nefarious means, even though you may be assenting, which is agreement on the face of it, or acquiescing, which is agreement under duress, you are not consenting, and the offender knows whether or not they've used a nefarious means in order to elicit your agreement. Bernie Madoff is in jail because he elicited agreement by dishonesty, and doing so could not be considered consent. It may be considered assent or agreement, but that still does not rise to the level of freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement. Harvey Weinstein is in jail because he elicited agreement through force and through coercion, and eliciting agreement that way also is not consent. It's the behavior and the intent of the criminal that makes the crime a crime, not the words and actions of the victim. Without the definition for consent, our laws look like Swiss cheese umbrellas, full of legal loopholes. And sexual predators just dive right into those legal loopholes with no accountability and no justice for their victims. Sexual assault defiles people, completely undermines their sense of self-worth. And sexual assault victims need the healing that justice provides. Several years ago, when the women's movement was getting underway, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg made a very, very significant statement that rings true today. Gloria Steinem turned to her during the first rally for the women's movement and said something sort of like, well, isn't this wonderful? Look at our fabulous turnout. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg turned to her and said, it changes nothing until we change our laws. We need bipartisan support in order to define consent in our laws. From the steps of the White House on August the 29th, Ivanka Trump challenged legislators to stop silencing their convictions in order to skip the hard fights. I ask you today, what kind of legislator will you be? Please, be the one who cares about the world our children are growing up in, and codify consent in our laws today. Doing less perpetuates rape mentality. We can make the world a safer place. Thank you.